Begin today the Gemara on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, right at the beginning of the Amud of Kahana. The Gemara here continues halachas and a discussion b'negea to a cheresh, a person that's deaf mute. In the Mishnah, it spoke about a ilaim, a person that is just mute, and the Mishnah said that he could signal with his hands or with his head for someone to write a get for him. And we accept that, and we have to inspect to make sure that he understands what he's communicating, but it's good. So here the Gemara brings a halach in connection to this. Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. Rav Kahana said in the name of Rav, Cheresh sheyochel adaber mitoich ksav. A cheresh. Now a cheresh over here means someone that's a deaf mute. Now the halacha of a deaf mute, he has a halacha like a person which is a shaita or a cotton, and he cannot divorce his wife at all. Rashi explains what we're talking about over here is a person that got married to his wife when he was still totally sane. So the marriage is a real marriage, minat Torah. So the Mishnah in Yevamah says for such a kind of a marriage that was a real marriage minat Torah, so now he becomes a cheresh, he became deaf mute, he can't divorce his wife. He has no das b'chlal to divorce her. So on that Rav is being mechadish. However, if this cheresh could speak mitoich haksav, sheyachal adaber mitoich haksav, he could communicate by writing clearly that he wants that there should be a get given for his wife. Right? He writes kisvu tnu, or maybe even he writes his own get. Then kaisvu v'noisten get lishtay. Even for this cheresh, you can write and give the get for his wife. Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says about this chiddush of Rav, Maika Mashmalon. What was Rav's chiddush here? Tanina. That's the halacha we learned before here in the Mishnah. Mishnah said, Nishtatik, a husband got married to his wife and he was totally sane. And then later, Nishtatik, he became mute. V'amru loy, they said to him, Nichtev, get le'ishtecha. Should we write a get for your wife? And v'hirkim b'reishai, and he nods with his head. So Beit Kenaisai, Shleisha Pamim. We inspect to see if he knows what he's nodding for 3 times, as we learned before in the Gemara, regarding another matter. We come to see if he understands what he's communicating here. Imama alav lav, if he shakes his head no for something that he should shake no, val hein hein, and he shakes his head yes for yes, so you can give the get. So here the Mishnah says, here's an elaim, he can talk, but if you can communicate otherwise, by nodding, so then it's good enough. So over here as well, regarding the cheresh, we understand the halacha should be the same. He's a deaf mute, but nevertheless, if he writes, it should be a good communication through writing. So what is the chiddush over here that Rav says more than what it says in the Mishnah? Amalei Rav Zayda. So Rav Zayda answers, how could you learn out from the Mishnah what Rav said? Ilaim kamret. You're comparing what it said in our Mishnah regarding a person which is just mute to what Rav is speaking about, which is a deaf mute. It's a completely different thing. Shani ilaim, the ilaim that the Mishnah talks about is different because an ilaim, as the Gemara here will bring from this brayse, is considered to be a person that has his das. He's considered to be in halacha a person that's totally sane and his communication is accepted. The Tanya, as we learned in the brayse, medaber ve'ena shemeya, a person that could talk but he cannot hear, zeu cheresh. So this is a person that's a cheresh. He's deaf. But this cheresh here is actually not the lashon of cheresh that Rav was talking about, and it's not the lashon of cheresh that Chazal usually are talking about. The lashon of cheresh shaita v'katan usually means a person that's deaf mute, and therefore he becomes equivalent to a shaita. But over here, this brayse is saying that the term cheresh could be used just for a person that only can't hear. Now shemeya ve'eina medaber, on the other hand, a person that can hear but he can't talk, zeu ilaim. That's a person that's called an ilaim, mute. And now, v'zeh, the brayse says, both of these, harehein kepikchen l'chol devreim. Their halacha for everything is like a regular sane person. Now, the brayse here brings, or the Gemara here brings, the source of these 2 expressions, cheresh and ilaim. Omimai, de medaber ve'ena shemeya zeu cheresh. Where do I see that a person that can talk but he cannot hear, so he's the one that's called a cheresh, and then shemeya ve'ena medaber, and someone that can hear but he cannot talk, zeu ilaim. He's referred to as an ilaim. The chsiv, it's clearly in a pasuk in Tehillim. Vani kecheresh loy eshma. I'm compared to a deaf and I don't hear. Or ki ilaim loy yiftach piv, and like an ilaim that doesn't open his mouth. So that's a clear pasuk. Or v'ibay yisayme, the Gemara says that the term ilaim means something else. Kida amri inchi. It's like what people say about a person that can't talk. Ishtakel milulei. His words were taken away from him. So Rashi says, so the ilaim is like this Rosh Tevis of ishtakel, the aleph and the lamed, and then the mem, milulei. Okay, so what's the point of Rab Zayda's answer here? Rab Zayda is saying that these 2 halachas have nothing to do with each other. What it said in our Mishnah, that a person that's a ilaim, that we trust his communication by nodding, is one thing. That's simpler because Elaim is a person that's a kipikeach l'chol dvarav. What Rav said was a much bigger chiddush. That a cheresh, which is considered to be like a shaita, but nevertheless, if we see that he can communicate b'chsav, very like a sane person, we accept that communication b'chsav even for a cheresh. So Rav Zayda now says regarding Rav's chiddush, but ikashili hakashili. If I have a question on what Rav said, the question here is as follows. Tanya, we learned in the Braisa. In Lo Yagid, the Braisa speaks about the Isser of a person that knows testimony for someone, and they bring him into the Bezdin to ask him, do you know testimony about this? And he swears to say that he does not. Right? As the pasuk there says, Nefesh kisechta, he swears, and he says he does not know any testimony, so Lo Yagid. If he does not say this testimony, the pasuk there concludes, V'nosa avaynai, then he has to sin. So for this, the Braisa learns out, it says Yagid, that he has to have the ability to say, to speak the testimony. Prat li'ilaim she'eni yochel lahagid. So therefore this excludes an Elaim, he's mute, he can't speak. So if he doesn't say his testimony, so then he doesn't have to bring the carbon asham for swearing that he doesn't know the testimony, which is usually the halacha for a person that swears that he doesn't know, but he's not chayiv. But the question now is, why isn't he chayiv? Amai, why not? But didn't Rav say that even a person that's a cheresh, if he communicates mitoich haksav, then it's acceptable? So why don't we say the same thing over here regarding this Elaim? He's mute, and nevertheless, his communication mitoich haksav should be good enough that it's a real testimony. And if he denies that he doesn't have and swears he doesn't have testimony, he should be chayiv for this. Now, Taisus over here asks the question that this question of Rav Zayda should not be a question only on Rav. This should be a question on the Mishnah. The Mishnah spoke about the Elaim and said that a Elaim could communicate. Rav's chiddush was regarding a cheresh, that a cheresh that's deaf mute could communicate with haksav. But here, this Braisa is talking about a Elaim, so why isn't there a question from our Mishnah? So Taisus explains, because over here it's talking about eidos. And eidos, it's not just enough to have any kind of communication. When a person wants to give a get for his wife, so for that, any clear communication that we know what he wants should be good enough. But for eidos, the Gemara understands here, even in the question, that you have to have a much better communication than just like a person that wants to say that give a get for my wife. So therefore the Gemara is asking dafka from Rav, because Rav said that writing is considered to be something which is such a clear communication that even a cheresh, which is deaf mute, nevertheless we accept what he writes mitoich haksav. So if Rav gives such credibility to communication when you write, so over here in this Braisa regarding eidos, the ksav should be good enough as an eidos, and if he doesn't give this eidos mitoich haksav, he should be chayiv for not giving it. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye answers to this, that the truth is the communication with haksav is perfect, but for eidos it's still not going to work. Eidos kamret, you're asking me a question here regarding eidos. Shani eidos, when it comes to testimony, the Rachmana Amar, the pasuk says that mipi hem, that the eidos has to be given from the mouth of the eidim themselves. V'loy mipi ksavam. But if eidim write the testimony, then the testimony is not accepted. Not because it's not clear enough, but this is what the Torah says. Testimony has to come dafka from the mouth of the Eidim, and they can't walk into Bezdin. Even an Eidim B'chlal that could talk. That's the pshat in the Gemara. The Eidim that could talk and they write their testimony, it's not accepted. So here Rashi points out a question that there is on this concept of Mipi and V'loi Mipi Ksavam, and this is a question that many Rishonim speak about, and there's many answers to this. If so, how could any shtar be accepted in Bezdin? One of the ways that we accept testimony is by looking at a document for a loan, for a sale, for any money matter. But it's mipi and v'loi mipi ksavam. The kol koyach of a shtar is the signatures of the Edom on it. So Rashi's answer here is that that's the derech of how Edom communicate through a shtar. That's what Rashi here says. It's not 100% clear what Rashi means. The Achreinim discussed this. It's mashma from Rashi that what he's saying is that the whole chesaron of mipiyam v'loy mipiksavam is, if the Eidim themselves are standing here in Bezdin, so why aren't you opening your mouth and talking? Something's strange here. Why are you communicating with bichsav? That's why it's possible. But if it's written a shtar from years before regarding a sale, the whole point of a shtar is that it should be a proof for many years later. So that's just the way a shtar works. So the fact that they're not talking and they're communicating through the shtar, that's how you communicate when it comes to a document. So over there's no chesaron of mipiyam v'loy mipiksavam. That's Rashi's pshat. There's many other pshatim in the Rishonim. One more famous pshat for now is the pshat of the Rambam. He says that the whole idea of using a shtar is midrabanan. Min HaTorah, we do learn from Mipi and V'lei Mipi Ksavam that a star would be puzzle. There's no edus in a star. Chachamim were masakin for people to be able to do business and make documents with edus, that the edus should be accepted. So it's all just midrabanan. Meisvei, the Gemara asks another kasha, and according to Rashi, this question here is on this brisa that we just quoted regarding eidos. So we just said that for eidos, mipik savam does not work, but now here the brisa says, kishem shebait genoisay legittin. Just like an individual that's mute and he just can shake with his nod with his head. So we have to inspect him to see whether he knows what he's nodding for. So our Mishnah said that we inspect to see regarding Gittin. So kach, similar, beit genoisai, we have to also inspect to see if he knows what he's communicating, lemasois or lematonis, which means for money matters, to sell and so on. Ule eidiyos, and then here the Brisa clearly says also for eidiyos, which simply would mean to testify about something, that he could testify through nodding and communicating that way. Uli Yerushis, and also for Yerushis, for inheritance, as the Gemara will explain soon. So here, the Gemara, Katani Mi is Eidos. It says here clearly that when it comes to an Eidos, you could communicate with Eidos just by nodding. It's not dafke b'dibur. So how could you say that there's a problem of mipik savam? Amar Rav Yosef, Bar Minyaimi, Amar Rav Sheishes. So he answers and says, the pshat here of Eidos is different. It doesn't mean regular Eidos. The Eidos Isha, this is specifically an Eidos for a woman to say testimony for her that her husband died. The Akilu Barabana. Regarding such an Eidos, we find that the Rabbanan were very lenient to accept Eidos. As Rashi here brings, when it comes to the Eidos, for a woman to say that her husband passed away, we accept even an Eid Echad, and even people that are usually Pasal Eidos are also relied upon. We learned about this in the Gemara in Yavamis. The Gemara there says that we have also a chazakah that Isha Daiko Mitzvah, that a woman is very, very careful before she gets remarried. So therefore, Chachamim were mekel, she shouldn't be an aguna, and they allow her to get married. So over here, there is an issue of mipi and v'lei mipi ksavam, but nevertheless, Chachamim accepted this edus, which otherwise would be possible. Frek the Gemara, but v'haketani Yerushas. It says here in the Brisa also that he can communicate and give eidos for Yerushais. So the Gemara understands that Yerushais means that they're coming to say eidos about Yerusha, who inherits. So it's not only an eidos for a Isha. Amar Rabavo, so Rabavo says, no, the term Yerushais here does not mean eidos for Yerusha. It means Yerushas Benaya B'char Ketani. If it's a person that he's passing away and he decides that he wants to give, usually the B'char gets a double portion. And if he wants to communicate and tell his children that the B'char should get equal to everyone else, so he's communicating, he can't talk already, but he's communicating by nodding and with signaling, and that's enough to be able to communicate. But not for Eidus though. For Eidus, that we have the issue of Mipi and V'lei Mipi Ksava. Fragt the Gemara, but Ketani Miyes Lamasois, Lamasois Lamatonois, but then it also says in the Braisa, Masois and Matonis, which means for business matters, for selling, buying. My lav la'alma. Oh, again, over here the Gemara says, don't you think that this means that this person that's a Elaim could communicate for Eidos, for these money matters? So again, we see it could be an Eidos, not only for a woman getting remarried, but even for money matters. So the Gemara answers, Loi lididei. It doesn't mean to communicate, to say Eidos for anyone else. It just means to communicate for himself, to signal that he wants to sell or that he wants to buy, but not for Eidos. For Eidos, we have the pasuk of Mipiyam v'lo Mipik Sava. Meisvei, the Gemara now goes back to Rav. The Gemara has, again, Rav's chiddush was a cheresh. He's deaf mute. He's considered to be a shaita, but if you can write clearly, that's a good communication, and you can give a get with that. So the Gemara asks from a brayse where it clearly says not so. Cheresh lo yholchu boy acher mizaysav acher kifitzaysav. When it comes to a cheresh, so because he's both deaf and mute, so we don't follow any signaling or kifitzaysav, movements of his lips, or va'acher ksav yadai. Not even for if he writes, Ela b'metaltel, and only if he wants to sell movable items. Avoloi legittin. But for a get, we will not rely on any of this by a cheresh. So this is a clear braisa, not like what Rav said. It says here clearly that even ksav yadai, to give a get, we don't rely on him writing, that we should be able to give a get. So the Gemara answers Tanoihi. So this halachah that it says in this brayse, it's a machlokes Tanoim, and Rav is paskening like another Tana. The Tanya, as the brayse there itself continues and says, "Oh, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel." So Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says about this that we don't rely on the ksav yad of a cheresh, but medvarim amurim becheresh meikare. When is that the case? If it's a person that was always a cheresh, because he never had the ability to communicate, he's always born deaf mute. So such a person, even his writing, we can't rely upon. Oh, so that's Gemara is going to discuss that in a second.
By force.
Avol pikeyach v'nischarish, but if it's a person that was once a pikeyach, and then he became a cheresh, so then hu kaisev, he can even go ahead and write his own get, and v'hein chaismin, and you have the edim that signed the get, and it's going to be kosher. So Rav is paskening like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rav was talking about a cheresh that was once a pikeyach, and therefore now we could rely on his writing. That's what Rab Shimon ben Gamliel said. Okay, but now the question is, what's Rab Shimon ben Gamliel saying here? That if he was a cheresh me'ikara, if he always was born cheresh, so then we can't rely on his writing for him to be divorced. In fact, the Gemara, the cheresh me'ikara loy. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel is saying if he was always a cheresh, then we can't rely on his writing or any of his signaling to get divorced. But why not? How did he get married? Kishem shekoinza beremize, kach meitzia beremize. He was always a cheresh, so his whole marriage is not a marriage minatayra. He got married as a cheresh. He only got married with signaling. So the halacha is that he, just like he married her this way, so he can give her a get in the same way, just with signaling. So how could Rab Shimon ben Gamliel say that by a cheresh me'ikara he cannot divorce her? So the Gemara answers, if it was his wife, he married her as a cheresh, hochanami. So you're right. So he can divorce her as well. But over here, what we're talking about is a yavama. That this yavama was married to the brother before, and that marriage to the brother was a real marriage. And now the brother dies, and there's a zikah. He has a chiyuv to go ahead and marry his brother's wife, and this is a zikah minatayra. Now he has to marry her, and he can't give her a get. Why? Because this brother is a cheresh meikare. He was always a cheresh, and therefore even writing will not help to communicate. So there's no way that he could can't do chalitza. Right? The Hirashi says the reason you can't do chalitza is because by chalitza he has to say loy chafatzti lekachta, and he can't communicate. So therefore he's going to have to marry her. And then once he marries her, so if he was a cheresh meikara, he can't divorce her. Okay, so now the Gemara clarifies this in. And here we're going to go into a little bit of a subject regarding the mitzvah of Yibum and certain halachas regarding Yibum by a Yecheresh. So the Gemara, Yevimtoi miman. So you're saying that we're talking here about a Yevama. Now, a Yevama of who? Right? Obviously from the brother, but the question of the Gemara is, what was the condition of the brother? What kind of a marriage was this to the brother? If the case here is that the brother that this wife, this Yavama, was married to, was also a cheresh. So again, the question that we asked before remains. Kishem sheknisasa beremize, just like she married the brother with signaling. Kachitziasa beremize, so she should be able to get divorced over here from this brother that has to do yibum also beremize, right? Because the marriage and the divorce always is the same. Elo, says the Gemara, the pshat over here is the nafale me'achiv pikeyach. That Rab Shimon ben Gamliel was speaking about a case where she was married minatayre because the brother was fully healthy and sane, and now he dies, and the brother that has to do the mitzvah of yibum is a cheresh. So if this brother is a cheresh me'ikarai, he can't do the mitzvah of yibum, and even if he's going to write, it's not a good communication. Writing for a cheresh is only for someone that was once a pikeach before. That's one pshat. But now the Gemara adds, we could say v'i bayiseme, or if you want, I'll tell you lo'ilam the nafalei ma'achiv cheresh. It could even be speaking about a case where this Yavama was married to the brother that was a cheresh. And if so, minat Torah, there is no marriage here. And therefore, now this Yavam should have the ability to divorce her. But nevertheless, gzeire achiv cheresh atu achiv pikeach. Chachamim were geyser that in such a case, he should not be able to divorce her, or he cannot do any chalitza, because of gzeire. The people shouldn't confuse this case with the case of if the brother was a pikeach. And people should know that in a case where this person now, the Yavam, is a cheresh, he could never divorce the wife. And like that, there will be no confusion between the brother that was first married to her, if he was a cheresh or pikeach. If you make such a kind of gzeire, so ihachi, if so, ishtoinami. When it comes to his wife as well, he should not be able to divorce her. If a person married his wife, and he married her when he was a cheresh, right? So his own wife, since he married her as a cheresh, he's able to divorce her as a cheresh. So he should not be able to divorce her either, because of the gzeira that if there's going to be a yavama, you may think that he could divorce the yavama, and he can't because the brother was a pikeach. So just like you're making a gzeira, if whether the yavama was married to a brother that was a cheresh or a brother that was a pikeach, why shouldn't you make the same gzeira regarding him divorcing his own wife? That we should say that a cheresh could never divorce his wife. Says the Gemara.
Or even if he married a pikeach, then she still should.
Okay, maybe. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the Gemara says that for such a gzeira we don't make. Yevimtoi bi yevimtoi michlefe. A person could confuse, there could be a confusion whether the brother was a pikeach or the brother was a cheresh. That's something that can get confused, and therefore Chachamim will geyser that any time this brother now is the yavam and he has to marry this yavama, if he's a cheresh, he can never do yibum at all. But, or he can't give a get, that is, he can't give a get or chalitza. But ishtoi biyevimtoi loy mechlefa. But people will not confuse the halacha that there is regarding his own wife and regarding the mitzvah of yibum that he has for his brother's wife. That people know that there's a distinction. So there's no reason to be geyser. But the Gemara continues and asks, Umi gazrinon cheresh otu pikeach. Do we still make this gzeira that the Gemara just said in a case where the brother was a cheresh, that you can't give a get because of the case where the brother was a pikeach? Do we make such a gzeira b'chlal? Here the Gemara is going to bring a beferish Mishnah that says that we don't make such a gzeira. Because vatna, we learned in the Mishnah in Yevamis that says, Shnei achin chershin. What happens if you have two brothers and they're both deaf mute and they're nesuin shtei achayis? They're married to two sisters. Now here the Mishnah spells out in different teifanim that they're married to these sisters, whether the sisters are pikches, whether both sisters are totally healthy. Or it's two sisters that both of them are also deaf mute. Or these two brothers that are chereshim are married to two sisters, achas pikachas, v'achas chereshes. One is healthy and one is not. So in all of these cases, the point is there's no marriage minatayra over here because the husbands, the brothers, they're chereshim. So it doesn't matter if the wife is healthy or not; they are chereshim. So there's no marriage. V'chein, on the other hand, shtei achoyis chereshes. If you have two sisters that they are chereshes, so now again, if they are chereshim, so then there is no marriage over here minatayra because you need their das for the marriage, and they're both chereshim. So there's no marriage here. And they're nesuos l'shnei achen. They're married to two brothers. Whether they're pikchen, whether these two brothers are totally healthy, or l'shnei achin chershin, or the brothers that are married to them are also chershin, or l'shnei achin echad pikeach ve'echad cheresh, one is a pikeach, one is a cheresh. In all of these cases, what are we talking about over here? It's all a marriage midrabanan, but the main point here is that it's two brothers that are married to two sisters. So if you remember what we learned in the beginning of Masechta Yevamis, when two brothers are married to two sisters, there's no mitzvah of yibum and there's no chalitza. Hare'elu peturais min hachalitza u min hayibum. Why? Because the halacha by the mitzvah of yibum is if the yavama is a erva, is a isser to the yavam, then there's no mitzvah. So over here, it's the sister of your wife. You can't marry a sister of your wife. So therefore, there's no mitzvah of yibum at all. If these two brothers that are chershin, so they're married to two wives that are not sisters, so then yikonsu. So there is a mitzvah of yibum here, and the only mitzvah that they could do is yibum, to marry them. They cannot do chalitza, because as I mentioned before, as long as they can't communicate, so you can't say in loy chafatzti lekachta, so there's no possibility for chalitza, so they can marry them. Now, once these chareshin marry them, v'imratzu lo haitzion yaitziu. Once they marry them, if they want to give a get, you could give a get. Now, so what does it say over here? Clearly in the Braisa, there were the two brothers that were chereshin, and one died, and the other one married his wife from this cheresh. So now after he married her, he can give her a get. So this goes against the gezeira. The Gemara said before. The Gemara said before that a cheresh could never give a get. Why? Because there's the gezeira. What's if the marriage of the brother was a pikeach, and people are going to confuse it. So you can never give a get. Over here it says, because the brother was also a cheresh, so that marriage wasn't a real marriage, so therefore you could give a get. So therefore the Gemara says, Ela machvarte kedishanan meikara. The right pshat is, like we said before, that the case that Rav Shimon Gamliel was speaking about when he said cheresh meikara was by the case of Yavama, and the first brother was a pikeach. So because it was a good marriage, so you can't give a get now. But if the first brother was a cheresh, so then there's no gzeira, and then the brother for the yibum could marry and give a get as well, because it wasn't ever a real marriage. Okay, the Gemara now comes back here to this subject. Again, the Chiddush of Rav that says that even a cheresh, as long as he can write, he can communicate, we accept that. And the Gemara brought a brayse, and it said it's a machlokes tanoim. The Chachamim said that if he writes, it's still not good. And Rav Shimon Gamliel said that if he could write, then it is good. Now, the Rabbi Yechanan explained, Chalukin olav chaveirav al Rav Shimon Gamliel. Rav Shimon Gamliel said his halacha, but the Chachamim, in the beginning of that brayse, they argue on Rav Shimon Gamliel. So Rashi over here explains, the chiddush that Rabbi Yechanan is trying to say is, what was the language that Rav Shimon Gamliel used? Rav Shimon Gamliel said, Bamed dvarim amurim. So when Rav Shimon Gamliel comes to say, Bamed dvarim amurim, it could sound like he's coming to clarify what the Chachamim hold. He's not coming to argue. So Rabbi Yechanan says, no. There's an argument about this, whether a cheresh, whether we can trust his writing or not. Omar Abaye, so Abaye said about this, Fana nami tanina. We learned also in another brayse where we could see that this must be a machlokes. Why? Because there's a brayse that says nishtatis. What happens if a person gets married to his wife and she's completely healthy, and then nishtatis, she lost her mind. Now she's a shaita. So the halacha is lo yaitzi. Chachamim say that he can't divorce her. As Rashi explains, this is gzeira midrabanan. Menatayre, you don't need the das of the isha to accept a get. So it doesn't matter if she's a shaita. But Chachamim don't want her to be divorced, because once she's divorced, now she's single and she's a shaita, all kinds of people could take advantage of her and do inappropriate things to her. So therefore, Chachamim say that in such a case, the husband cannot divorce her. Mischarish, if he's married to his wife and then she becomes a chareshes, so again, let me read this again. Nischarish, who the husband became a cheresh, or the husband became a shaita. So then lo yotzi elamis, he cannot divorce his wife forever. Now this is minatayda. You can't divorce because for a get you need the das of the husband to divorce his wife. But the expression that the brayse here uses is lo yotzi elamis. That this husband that became a cheresh could never. He has no option of divorcing his wife. Now, my elamis, what is this expression of elamis here saying? It didn't say it in the Reisha. When his wife became a shaita, it didn't use that expression. Why here is it saying elamis? So, don't you think that it's coming to say, that even if you could communicate by writing, that's not an option either. So from here we see not like what Rav said, so we must say that the Chachamim in the Braise disagreed with Rav Shimon and Gamliel and say that communication by writing is worthless. Rav Papa, so the Gemara here will give two pshatim in this term oilamis, in this braise, and it's not a raya that the Chachamim argue. So Rav Papa says, he loved Ashminin Rabbi Yechanan. If not for the fact that Rabbi Yechanan told us the pshat that Chachamim do argue with Rav Shimon Gamliel and said that you cannot communicate by writing, Hava Mineh, I would say that Rav Shimon Gamliel lefrusha time of the Tanakama dasa. That Rav Shimon Gamliel and the Tanakama there are not arguing, and Rav Shimon Gamliel is just explaining what the Tanakama is saying. Your question is, if everybody would agree that you could communicate by writing, so why does the Braise use this term oilamis, that he could never divorce his wife? He could, he has the option through writing. The answer is, the term oilamis means something else. Afagav the chazina le the charef. What it's saying is, even if you see that this person is very sharp and he's with it, then he could communicate, not by writing, but you could think that even if he's very sharp, that maybe you should be able to divorce his wife. So the Braise is saying he can't. But if he's actually going to write, then maybe he could. That's not what the Braise is coming to exclude. That's one shot. Inami, or the Gemara says, the reason why the Braise here uses the term oilamis is l'kad Rabbi Yitzchak, because it wants to point out a distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa, like what Rabbi Yitzchak said. And I mentioned this before. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Dvar Teire, Mina Teire, the halacha is, Shaita Miskareshes, that if a person's wife turns into a shaita, she can become divorced. He can give her a get. Why? Just like if his wife is fully healthy, you don't need her consent for the get. You give her the get against her will. So why should it matter if she's a shaita? What's the reason why it says here that she cannot be divorced to Shaita? It's Gzeirim Midrabanan. So if she's now divorced and she's single, people are going to come and do inappropriate things to her. So the Braisa here, in the Reisha, when it says that a Shaita can't be a get, that's only Midrabanan. In the Sefer, when it says that the husband can't give a get, since that's Minatayra, therefore it uses this term Oilamis to point out that this is much stronger, that this is Minatayra, that he cannot give a get. But there's no Raya that there's a Machlaikis about the communication of a Cheresh regarding writing. Okay, the Hemshech of the Gemara here goes all the way down to the next Amid, so we'll stop over here today.